put anything here. If
It's just like when you came up the second time, and you started talking about Ms. Magoon, and they go, "Is she for or against?"
Right.
Well,
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 17th Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we will start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Before we get started, I want to welcome Miss Ames, who's joining us this evening and filling in for Miss Hirschberger as our school board representative.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. First on our agenda, or next on our agenda, is opening up for any public input that we have this evening. And I do not see any public input, so I will close it. We'll have one more at the end of our meeting this evening. Next, any members have review or addition to tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, just a quick recap. We're going to do this very similar to how we did last week. We're going to do school business first, and then we'll do town second. And also, before we get into our three remaining items for questions, we are going to summarize the questions that we asked last week that were captured in the Google Docs. We'll make sure everybody gets an opportunity to hear the questions that we asked and the answers that the school provided. All right, next is correspondence. Thank you again for Ms. Stevens for putting this together. Correspondence. On November 10th, Mr. Sun shared the budget committee questions for the school district via shared Google document. On November 11th, Mr. Sun shared the agenda for tonight's meeting. On November 13th, Mr. Sullivan shared the draft meeting minutes for the November 10th meeting. Also on November 13th, Ms. Stevens asked if the school board was planning to discuss a policy on special education underspend funds during their November 16th meeting. On November 14th, Dr. Jetty responded that the school board public agenda will be posted by end of day. On November 16th, the budget committee and general public were invited to Fire Chief Freitzel's farewell reception on November 30th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the firehouse. And then finally, today on November 17th, Ms. Hirschberger shared the school board's October financial and operations update and responded with answers to budget committee questions raised over the past week. The shared documents with those questions and answers will be attached to the meeting minutes. It's a summary of our correspondence from last week. I do want to take a minute and just say Mr. Sullivan is not here with us tonight. Had a family emergency and just wanted to let him know that our thoughts are with him this evening. And with that, we will go into our school business. So just to kind of recap for everyone watching tonight, kind of where we are in our process, we spent last week going through a big majority of the school district's budget. It was an opportunity for the budget committee to ask questions. This was after we had an opportunity to attend the school board meetings on November 1st and November 3rd. Hear school board questions, school board motions, and also ask some questions of our own that evening. Coming out of that meeting last week on November 10th, we captured some questions that we had as follow-up for the school district, for staff, for principals, for directors, and those were captured in a Google Doc that'll be attached to our meeting minutes so everyone can see those for transparency. But we're going to take a minute before we go into our last three sections that we have this evening and just go through those questions, make sure we've got the answers that we're looking for, and any elaboration that Dr. Jetty or Mr. Taunton have that they can add to, they can feel free to do that. So then after we go through those questions, the three remaining sections that we have in the budget are curriculum, special services, and facilities. So we'll go through each of those just like we did last week, opportunity for us to ask any questions of the two gentlemen, or anything that we want to capture in the Google Doc for them to go back and get answers for, okay? That's kind of our flow for this evening. And then kind of just laying out the whole picture, we're obviously not meeting next week, which is Thanksgiving. And then beginning 2 weeks from today, December 1st, is when we begin our voting on the school budget. Okay? All right, so I believe this is shared up on the screen. Oscar, if you're able to share what's up on the screen also with the public will get an opportunity to see these as we kind of summarize them. And again, these are questions from last week that the budget committee had over the sections that we reviewed last week. First question that was asked was, do we have updated insurance numbers for the FY24 budget? And what you see in red are the responses from the school district. Yes, these will be going to the school board on 11/16, which was last night. From how we budget after the holiday credit, our rates from FY23 to FY24 after the holiday credit have increased 14.2%. So I know that, is there anything, you all shared that with the school board last night. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add to that, or if that answer was...
No, so since doing that, what Holly's done is she's loaded the budget now into each individual person's budget, as far as healthcare and dental, and then decreased the line at the end of the budget that said, here's our placeholder for the bump up in health. So what we'll do is we'll get, early next week, we'll get you the new version of the budget, which would have that, nothing at that line at the bottom for health and dental, and everything kind of added in throughout the budget.
What was budgeted for the increase? What had you budgeted, just as a
10.
placeholder?
Is 10%.
Yeah. And I should have mentioned this before I started these questions. Literally right as the meeting started, I shared an email with the committee. It was a spreadsheet that Mr. Taunton had put together that summarized all of the actions that the school board has taken on the 1st, the 3rd, and then again last night. And I mentioned in that email what Mr. Taunton just shared, that early next week he's going to send us an updated PDF that will show everything. The second question that we had was, do we have updates on the proposed 45-cent electorate rate during the second half of FY24? I'll read the answer, and then certainly feel free to add. After shopping around, we're confident we'll be able to lock in a rate through FY24 that is less than the forecast 45-cent rate. School board is proposing a corresponding reduction in the electrical line of 622 at GMS of $60,000 and of $70,000 at CHS. And I know the school board took some action on that last night. Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so we have a rate which starts this December and goes to the next December of 17 cents. So it's really the December of 23 through June of 24. And what we did is we went out and shopped rates for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And the longer you go out, the lower the rates go, but then also the longer you're locked into the rate. And the penalty for leaving for a bigger district is much different than penalty for leaving if you're locked in as an individual. They make it so you really don't want to leave, because they're buying future shares on your behalf as well. So what we've decided was that probably the 6-month rate makes the most sense, because that will do a couple different things. It will lock us in for the fiscal year 24 budget, and then moving forward, you tend to lock in for a year or 2 years at a time, 12 months, 24 months. So that would get us on our fiscal year budget to always lock in the same rate for a whole fiscal year. So yesterday, that rate was a little bit less than 17 cents, and today it was a little bit over 17 cents. We tried to lock it in today, but what happened was that they had, on the contract, they had the middle school, and they had taken the middle school off one time, but they didn't take off the second address of the middle school. And I'm not quite sure why the second address is there. Might have been for the modulars, but before we signed the contract, we wanted to make sure that they were both off of the contract. And to get something off a contract takes longer than just setting up the contract. And you have to have things signed that day. So there was a little bit of race to see if they could get it to us before 5 p.m. That wasn't able to happen. So we'll start the process again tomorrow. Whether we sign tomorrow or whether we sign next week, we're looking to get right around that 17 cents, whether it's, a little bit less or 17.5 cents. That's just a much better way to budget than the 45 cents. And that gets us to those reduction rates, which is what we want, to kind of go up in the budget that much on electricity, which obviously is important for schools, but it's not the function of a school to have to go up that much before. Didn't feel good for anybody. So to kind of get rates that still aren't great if you look at like 2 years ago, but currently, to lock in at 17 cents for, through June of 24 currently doesn't seem that bad.
So my question would be, if our consultant was saying 45 cents and you're getting 17 cents, why is our consultant so far off?
So the consultant isn't involved with the person who we shop around with, two different people. And he was using what Eversource was saying that the rates are going to go up to this January for large businesses. And Eversource, I believe, keeps on saying that, the rates are going up. And that's the number that we had at that time to go off of. And your thinking was the same as my thinking, around the same time. Let's see if we can extend our contract to, if 17 cents is just a much better number to aim for, so.
Yeah, it's not quite what I was thinking, but when somebody comes in with 45 cents, it just makes me question a lot of the other numbers too, to be frank. Just so, what other numbers did this guy give us 3 times higher than they ought to be? So we will drill into those as we go through it, so thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
So first and foremost, fantastic work. Thank you very much. Out of curiosity, what was the best rate you could get for long term? And I'm just jotting that down just as a mental note for
2 years,
for
if they were
future.
to do the 2 years.
Yeah. Then what could we get for a rate?
Yeah, let me, buried in.
We can put a
Yeah,
pin
that's
in
fine.
that, and one of the things that we talked about, and Ms. Ames, if you don't mind doing this, because Ms. Hirschberger did this last week, if we have any follow-ups that are on here, if you could capture those in the Google Doc, and then Doug can go back and get those.
Absolutely.
Or any additional questions that we add at the bottom, if you're able to capture those, please.
Sure.
So this was off of yesterday. So the 6-month rate was 16.995, and then the 36-month rate was 12.316, so around 12 cents.
Why would we not lock that one in?
Well, it wasn't too long ago that we were at 6 cents as well, so.
Yeah, well-
And so that would be 3 years out from, not this December, but the fall, so that would lock us in for 4 years.
No, I appreciate that. I guess the question is, do we actually think we're gonna go back to 9 cents? And I guess it's a wager, right? One way or the other.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the rest of our questions to summarize. Question 3 was, what was the special services underspend? What has the special services underspend been for each of the last 3 years? In FY20, it was $150,007.53. In FY21, it was $179,868.99. And in FY22, it was $290,475.48. Question 4 was around LMS line 610 world languages. What supplies will compromise the $2,400 in that line item? The response was because of state minimum standards indicating we must offer consumer science standards like cooking and sewing, it will be encompassed in the 2 Spanish courses through cultural cooking and crafts. Question 5 was from CHS, 561 tuition. This was current year to date on CTE enrollment and tuition. The answer was we will not receive an invoice for tuition until about a month after the first half of the year. We do receive an estimate around the middle of November, so we should see that soon. And then there was a link that showed current enrollment numbers. Question 6 was CHS and LMS list of stipends by co-curricular. There was a link that was provided to the LEA 2022-2024 co-curricular activities and stipends. Is that link, I assume, is that on your website somewhere? Do you know?
So I believe, so that's actually an appendix to the collective bargaining agreement, so
Okay.
that is on our website. It's also on the PELRB website, and if you access it there, you can get to the same information.
Question 7 from CHS, 610 supplies year-to-date expenditures. And the response was, as of 10:35 a.m. on 11/14/22, I love the detail there, CHS has expensed $63,185.44 for all supplies. This is the 610 account for regular ed, special ed, athletic, nurse, library, out of a budget of $168,428.06. Question 8, HR 446, software lease. Are subs included in the cost for Vector? And the answer was no, we did not include subs. Question 9, please provide the 21 food service fund. Oh, this was a reminder that I know Ms. Hirschberger was looking to get, and so that is linked there for folks who did not have that last week. Question 10, map out increases and decreases relative to realignment. And this is a link to a document that shows some of the positions that were proposed by the school district. I don't know if you all want to speak either one of you want to speak to that at a high level?
Let me open it up. So essentially, if you remember, we are looking to expand the school psychologist role into a district-wide position. So the second item on here is special ed district-wide school psychologist. And so that is the expanding the hours and the contract time, really. It's not the hours, it's the number of days the person will work. And so that is the cost to do that. And then we would also propose adding a mental health clinician at the middle school, because that is where the psychologist is currently based. So the mental health clinician will be available to deal with the day-to-day crises that may pop up. And it'll allow the school psychologist to focus at the higher level of the type of testing and referrals that are necessary for somebody with that status. And then the other item is looking to expand the social worker position at GMS into, we're actually pulling it out of the grant, if I remember correctly, and so expanding the amount of time that the person will be in the budget at Griffin. And you can imagine that we're seeing an increased need for both social workers and mental health clinicians in the current climate. And so, so those are all the adds. And then in order to help pay for that, you can see that we are reducing our professional services line, because as we did not have a school psychologist at the high school or at the elementary school, we ended up contracting services out, and it was fairly expensive to do that. So there is a savings in consolidating those lines down at 51,000, leaving a net increase of 51,000. And so that's what this spreadsheet is intended to map and to show. It's not completely budget neutral, but I think what it does is it puts the right people in the right seat to perform the right task, and allows us to be more effective at the way we deploy the services in meeting the student needs.
So, Dr. Jetty, a couple questions on that. So, moving the school psychologist up to the district-wide level. 2 questions on that. One, will moving that person to that position and solely that position, can that person conduct the amount of testing that needs to be done? And then my follow-up question is, just like we had talked last year with the special ed teacher, and you know, this, some people can do some things, some people can't do certain things. Do you have an idea in terms of this, our current school psychologist or this particular role, what percentage of testing that particular person can do versus how much we would still have to outsource because that person may or may not be able to do it because they're not certified versus the throughput side?
So the school psychologist should be able to conduct all the testing that is necessary.
Okay.
I mean, I say that, there's always that opportunity, like there are specialists in everything. There could be a psychology specialist who performs a particular test depending on what an individual student needs are. So there could be something that's outside of the realm, but that would be few and far between.
Okay.
And so they ought to be able to handle everything and really to focus on doing just that, right? The other thing is it will require us to make sure that our special educators are trained on providing some testing that they are currently relying on the school psychologist to do, but the school psychologist, you don't need that credential in order to conduct that testing. It's just been practice that, oh, the school psychologist will do that.
Okay.
So we're going to have to get, again, the right testing into the seats or in the hands of our special educators, and then have the school psychologist perform the tests that are required of that.
Okay, so one follow-up question on that, just real quick.
Yeah.
So are you concerned then by reducing 2 special education teachers here that you still won't have enough bandwidth to be able to handle all the testing if you're gonna have some of the teachers do it?
We are not.
Okay.
We feel that the current staffing and the caseloads that we have will allow us to complete all of that. A caveat, though, is that, and back to question number 1, with special ed, if there's a referral that's made, there's a window of time. The clock starts ticking when the referral begins, and you have a 45-day window to get testing completed. And that can be frustrating if a student's absent and not in attendance. Those days are counting. It's 45 calendar days, so you've got to find a way to make all of this happen. So we have included we didn't reduce the professional services line to zero because there could be a scenario where 2 or 3 referrals hit at the same time, the clock is ticking, and we gotta outsource one, right? Because the capacity for that one person to get 3 done may not exist. And so we're leaving wiggle room in that line to make sure that we can get the testing done and meet the obligations.
Okay, one more follow-up question. See, you guys shouldn't have me at meetings. Do you typically find that there is like a wave, like at the beginning of the year, where you're gonna, no matter what, if you had one person or 2 people, you're still gonna have a whole lot of testing that has to get done based on referrals at the beginning of the year, or is it kind of just a steady state throughout the year?
I think the wave that's been described to me, so I don't directly oversee that, but the wave that I've seen and heard about is more at the end of the year.
Okay.
A student didn't meet educational objectives during the year, and hey, we gotta do some testing to figure that out. This has been part of our problem. We have school year employees, they're done on the last day of school, they work 186 days, and now we have to contract in the summer to have them complete the testing, right? So we actually think having a district-wide employee who is year-round will allow us the flexibility with our staff over the summer that we don't currently have. Because again, when you start a 45-day window, it's ticking. And you can imagine that if you're using 10 days in June and 30 days in July, that window's closing before school opens. So that's a real scenario that we do face. And Doug, have you seen other waves? I don't think it's so much a start of the year wave. The only other piece that does happen is if you have a new student who moves in at the start of the year, that can also be a trigger where you're like, okay, we've got to figure out what's going on with this kiddo. But
A lot of times when the 3-year eval is when they do the more extensive testing, and a lot of schools try to spread those out. So not all the 3-year evals for current students with IEPs happen, say, in the spring. You try to spread them out to the fall and the winter. So that can all happen through some coordination. Another wave sometimes is about 3 months into the school year, a little bit, especially for younger students who they're not able to progress through some of the response to interventions, and so you need some more testing to figure out where they are specifically struggling. So sometimes that testing occurs, and the IP process starts rolling in for those students as they're not progressing.
And then if I can, one more question.
Sir. We missed
Sorry,
you
Brian, guess what? 10 o'clock tonight, buddy.
we missed you last week, Scott.
So with this particular plan, then you would have both a clinician and a social worker at each of the 3 schools. Is that correct?
Not GMS, I don't.
GMS would be
GMS
missing.
has just a social worker? Or?
that's correct.
Yeah.
And yeah, so GMS has a counselor and a social worker. LMS will have the social worker and the clinician that we're adding.
Yeah.
And the high school has the clinician and social worker.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Question 11 from last week. There was an ask for clarification on insurance doubling up in report. What was used for each budgeting year rates versus actual rates on insurance holiday? The response received was rates after insurance holiday were budgeted year to year. In FY24, rates were budgeted at a cost before premium holiday. We'll be bringing this to the school board on 11/16 to budget like we have in the past, rates after the holiday credit. And I think you all hit on some of this in the first question as well, right?
Yeah,
Anything additional?
Yeah, just that the holiday credit isn't the same every year. So for example, in fiscal year 24, the holiday credit was in total $203,000. And again, that's shared between the district, because the district pays towards the healthcare, as well as the employee has their portion that pays towards it. And then fiscal year 23, it was about $152,000. And then for next year, fiscal year 24, it's going to be $20,249. So obviously it keeps going. It's kept going down as, during COVID, when people were putting off elective surgeries and things like that, there was more money open. And then just like schools in town they received money from the federal government, so has hospitals. So they've used that to kind of diminish the cost, but that money is also going away from a lot of the hospitals. So I think we'll continue to see rates increase and holiday premiums not really exist.
Okay, thank you. Question 12 from last week, and I think this might be our only outstanding question, was around transportation and ridership numbers and evaluation of a bus run. And it looks like in the notes that Miss Flynn has had people from First Student working on ridership numbers for us, and that was a couple of days ago, it looks like.
That's correct.
Question 13 from last week, technology. Are there opportunities within the software budget to take advantage of free state software? The cost once free time frame is over. The response was reaching out to iLearn New Hampshire. They did state that Canvas was part of it, and implementation would have to be done to gain access to Kaltura. Yes, schools do need to sign up for Canvas and walk through the implementation process to then receive Zoom and Kaltura. This was actually a question that I had asked, and Chris and I had a conversation in the parking lot of the fire station about this, and it was a concern that he had that, yes, there might be an opportunity to save a couple $1,000s, but it might also require having to implement another solution in order to get that free tool, and that was the question that he asked and the response that he got. Question 14, school learning commons. Can we phase out the computers in the library at some point in the future? Rationale to use Chromebooks or use old computers from labs. The response was, we're currently using Chrome devices in GMS and the LMS Learning Commons. CHS has Windows desktop similar to those in labs for when students need to make up work and don't have access to the lab computers. Doug, I know you and I were chatting about this briefly before the meeting, and if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, so I followed up with Chris on that question. I said, so for the lab at CHS, are you just using kind of as a lab goes for say AP computer science or something like that, are you just using like the best 5 computers that's left over from that? He said, yeah, that would be our plan, not to purchase new computers for Learning Commons, used to be known as a library, but Learning Commons, they would just recycle the best of the old.
So if folks remember last week, we talked about the labs that were there were the ones that really had that specialized software for, I think one was for art and the other was for computer science. And I think this makes me feel better that we're not just buying computers that are sitting there when kids have Chromebooks. Rather, as we're replacing those specialized labs, we're taking the best of those that have to be replaced and putting those in the Learning Commons. So the cost is minimal to none on that. And then question 5, technology. Do we truly need 3 labs at CHS? I think Ms. Douglas had asked this one. This budget is to replace one of the labs which requires specific software that can only run on Windows machines. We're evaluating the other labs to make sure we match the needs of the hardware to the curriculum and programs. And Doug, did you have any additional context on that? This was the one we were looking at kind of the scheduling, right? So if there's open periods during the day when labs aren't being used, could we get from 3 labs to 2 labs?
Yeah, so I know Chris has been working on this. Last time I checked in with this, he had gotten some responses from the teachers as far as proving why they need to use non-Chromebooks, and he's had some follow-up conversation. And I don't think that's finished at this point, and I don't have an update from him at this point.
No, I don't think the question was necessarily, do we need those computers? I mean, obviously your digital technology and there was animation and computer science. You clearly need those, but the question is like more of the scheduling. Do we need 3 full labs?
Yeah.
If 2 of them are half utilized, then
Right. It was more of a scheduling issue. Like if there's open periods in each of those labs throughout the day, can we coordinate the master schedule so that we only need 2 of those labs versus 3 labs?
And I think he's starting with, do we even need the 3 full labs to start with? And then from there, we can kind of see what's left at that.
okay.
Thank you. The last question that we had from last week, and Mr. Taylor, I believe this one was yours as a follow-up via email. Can we receive enrollment numbers for all current year CHS classes in each sport in the 2021-22 seasons? And there was a hyperlink that was placed in this document. Dr. Jetty, if you're able to open that, we can display that for the public to see, which shows class sizes for all classes at CHS, as well as CTE courses and athletic enrollments as well.
So the class size is just a couple of things to note in here if you go down. So you see a class size of 3, and you'll notice that it's in blue. That's because it's actually linked to another class. So it's not 3 students and 1 teacher, it's 3 that are linked with somebody else, okay? So all those smaller numbers, I'll give you an example. If you look at this 9 that Dana Barassa has in Accounting 1, That is meeting C block. You go down to the other C block in blue. He also has 7 students in accounting 2. So it's really 16 students combined in accounting 1 and 2 at the same time. So again, because the course requests are smaller, we schedule them at the same time. The ones that are in red, such as marketing 1, also Mr. Barassa, he has 28 students scheduled to be in marketing 1. And I highlighted in red anything over 25. So you'll see numbers between 26 and I think 30 is the band number. So that's the largest number that you'll see on there. And what is yellow? Yellow are classes that, so this personal finance class with Kim Barnett has 8 students in it, but it began and was scheduled because it had more than 8. And this is one of the dangers of changing your schedule at the high school, because we run it based on requests and we meet the student requests. And sometimes you look at it and say, why did you run it with 8? Well, it was already September 5th when it went to 8, and you can't cancel it on the 8th. So that's just the reality of a high school schedule. There are a few examples where they're smaller and they're running, and it's just the nature of the way it played out in the schedule.
What is the trigger for the number of classes, the number of kids required to offer a class?
So it's going to vary by, there's not one trigger rule. There's not a
Okay.
number that triggers. So for example, in an advanced elective course, an AP course, we would have a lower threshold than we would in other courses. I can tell you that the other piece is, if you look at this, you'll see there's a bunch of social studies classes that are over 25. There's a lot of them that are in red. I think there's a 30, a 29, a 28. And in that case, the department said, we would rather have a little bit larger classes so that we can offer more electives. So that was a individual decision that was made at the department level, because they could have offered one more section of U.S. history. You divide by one more section and you have classes of not 28, but you have classes of 21. However, they wanted to be able to also have the electives available. So again, it's not a hard and set rule. We listen to teacher input and then make a decision based on that.
Question on the CTE tab. Are those our courses that we teach at Campbell, or are those courses that are Alvern, Pinkerton?
Yeah, so if you look at the top of column A, it says
Oh, I see.
center,
A and P.
M or P. So it's Alvern, Manchester, and Pinkerton. And to look at it, you see this one is called 3CTEA.
Yep.
That's the A I'm talking about. That Health and Science Tech with 9 kids is running at Alvern.
Got it.
And I sorted them by the number of students, because you can see some are very popular, and if you work your way down, you'll see that others are meeting the needs of one learner. And excuse me, and then the courses that nobody signed up for, I just showed you that we didn't have anybody in Auto Tech 2. So that's just left at the bottom as a program that we've had in the past that nobody is actually enrolled in this year.
Follow-up question on CTE, and then taking a look at the courses as a whole. Certainly the expansion of, salaries, benefits, the whole 9 yards. And you've mentioned numerous times in the past that, the CTE classes are actually a very good bargain. It's cheaper than offering it at Campbell, for example. Has there been any analysis around some of the electives that are second level at Campbell, instead of offering those classes, pushing those students towards more of a CTE program where they can get, as deep as they want to?
Right. So I don't know that we've done that level of analysis on it. There are 61 students who are taking the CTE courses. And again, it's a very personalized, but by the time you get to your junior, senior year, you sort of have a sense of where it is you're going and what you want to do. So this does allow that deeper dive and exploration into one of the trades, for example. The other electives complement those in many cases, so it's not an either or. It's not, I'm going to go do auto tech and therefore I won't have to take a woodshop class, right? Because they might say, I want both of those experiences. So it can be difficult, but our guidance department is committed to making sure that all students are aware of what's offered and have opportunities for it. There's a lot of stigma that goes along with CTE. It's wrong stigma because it's leftover stigma from,
Sure.
when parents may have been in high school and what they perceived as CTE opportunities then. But this is not your father's CTE. These are
No, not at all, especially with the
advanced-
amount of nursing students that we've seen go through over the
Got it.
last 4 or 5
I
years.
grew up with a solid
And
program, so
And
I'm
anybody
surprised
who's
that
tried to
people
get a
would have a
plumber to
stigma
come and
with it.
fix something, we need more than one kid in plumbing, right? I mean, so all of these opportunities exist.
me.
And I think, we need to continue to make sure that our students understand what's available. It's not a lifelong commitment either. It's,
Right.
just a good experience.
I totally agree and appreciate that. And just a fun fact, I myself was a former CTE teacher, so I appreciate the importance of those programs. A question that I have is a follow-up. I noticed, it looks like a vast majority are going to Alvern, right? I saw 3 to Pinkerton, and I haven't counted Manchester
I
yet.
think it's 1 or 2.
2.
But I did see an overlap that looks like there's one student who's going to Pinkerton for Health Science Tech 2, and that's something looks like it's also offered at Alvern. Is that a scheduling issue as to why that student can't do Alvern, or is it a choice?
So I don't know the answer. I'd have to dig into why that is, but my gut reaction is it could be the time that it's offered. So, because again, sometimes you'll have a singleton. Of course, it's only offered once in the day at
Yep.
Campbell, and it conflicts. So students saying, I am a band kid,
I have to take
and it's
a
exactly
band,
at the
yeah.
same time as this. And so we will then say, well, there is another opportunity. Because it's in the afternoon at Pinkerton, and so you're still able to do band and access that. I mean, I've seen that example play out numerous times. I can't tell you that's exactly the case with
Sure.
that student, but
does the district offer, or does it provide, I should ask, transportation to Manchester, or is that self-transport?
I believe Manchester is self-transport.
Is there the opportunity to say that Pinkerton is self-transport?
There's always an opportunity, because I think we had students last year, so I can't speak to this year, who were self-transporting.
Okay. Because I mean, that
But
the busing to Pinkerton would be a nice little
As long
budget
as they
relief.
weren't probably freshmen or sophomores taking
I
those
think it's
courses.
No, they can't.
So the other but,
You have to
though,
take it.
is if a student and family are able to complete the self-transportation paperwork and to do the self-transport, I mean, we have students who drive to Alvern, it's 5 minutes down the road, and they still drive to Alvern. So that's always an option, but there are families who don't have access to that paperwork, they can't do that, in which case we are obligated to provide the bus, so.
So just so far, we've been lucky that Manchester,
Correct.
nobody has required transportation from us.
To my knowledge, that's accurate.
Do we waive the parking fee for them? Because it seems like you're saving money on that deal. So, hey, you're self-transporting in Manchester, we're not gonna charge you $100 parking. Just throwing it out there. That might be a nice little,
They still
Thank
park the
you.
car there.
but I'm not paying for a bus, so I'm like, to me, win-win. And we can talk about the parking fee afterwards, because I've been opposed to that since I moved to town.
You wanna raise it?
I don't think there should be a parking fee.
Okay, I think we've summarized all of our questions. That took a little bit longer than I think I had originally planned, but that's okay. I think it was good to talk through some of these, clarify some answers, ask some additional follow-up questions. So I appreciate everyone indulging on that. So thank you. And any additional questions that we have tonight, we'll make sure we capture in this same document. They'll be, we'll make sure we read those out at our following meeting, and they'll be attached to the minutes for transparency. So, I did notice I skipped over review and acceptance of minutes. I'll come back to that after we go through the school, because we're kind of in that flow already. So I didn't forget it, I just accidentally missed it. So with that, we're gonna transition to finishing up our school budget review. And the last 3 sections we have left are curriculum, special services, and facilities. So we will start with curriculum. We'll let Mr. Taunton and Dr. Jetty give a high-level overview, and then opportunity for us to ask any questions around the curriculum budget.
So Mary Widman, our CIA director, as we like to call her, put forward this slide just pointing out what budget drivers there are. So the increases are in the textbook and program lines, because they have just gone up significantly. And the key thing, it's all due to company increases. And I'm not sure if this is the residual of, we're gonna go away from textbooks and get into more electronic stuff, and boy, the publishers are gonna find a way to make their money anyway, because now the increases are unlike anything we've seen. And Mary was very frustrated in trying to go out to bid on these, but these are the quotes that are coming in. She has checked in with her fellow CIA directors in other districts, and it's not a Litchfield thing. Everybody's seeing this sort of driver taking place. iReady is a personalized pathway program that we have adopted. It provides our teachers with an incredible amount of information, and it's more responsive than like statewide testing. So statewide testing is a once-a-year event. You get the results back. However, iReady allows them to test more frequently and check in with students to see what their status is. And it's no longer a pilot for us, so that's had an increase in the cost of doing iReady, but I can assure you our teachers are getting a lot out of that data. And the other one is our course reimbursement. So we have contractual obligations with our teachers, with our support staff, and also with our non-union staff. And those contractual obligations mean that we had to increase the amount of money that was in that line in order to ensure that we're able to meet the coursework that people are taking. So I guess more coursework is a good problem to have, because it means our people are staying fresh, training themselves, and there's a cost that goes with it. There was one decrease of $2,100, and that is in the professional development line, the general professional development line, and so Mary was able to take that. So overall, this budget is looking at an increase of $81,610, mostly driven by the price of materials that we're facing.
Questions for the curriculum budget?
I just have one, course reimbursement as to why it's $0 in 20 and 21.
Which line is
What
that,
line
Brian?
is that, Brian?
I'm sorry, 270, bottom of page 1.
Yeah.
So those are the non-union lines, so that would cover administrators. There's some district-wide staff who would fall into that. So it's not anybody who's in LEA or LSSA. And the answer is that nobody was taking classes at that point in time. Again, I think as we have new administrators joining us, they have a different perspective on accessing coursework.
So I think there's at least 3 administrators now working through some form of classes. So Mary had reached out to, and knew who was kind of working through, and said who's gonna continue to kind of work through classes.
I just wondered if it just wasn't captured in those years and it fell somewhere else.
No, I think we just have people taking courses now that weren't.
So 641, can you clarify for me I can read this line in multiple different ways, so I'm just curious as to which one's correct. We're 1 year into a reading program purchase. There's 1 year into reading program purchase, in which case there's more years coming. Like, I guess, what is it truly, what are we actually buying for the 75,000? Is it the first year of several year purchase? Is it 1 year of the purchase? Like, I don't understand what.
Yep, so that's a really good question. So we're adopting a new reading program.
Mm-hmm.
It's in grades 1 through 5, that's what 1 through 5 is, and we're 1 year into it, and the annual cost is $75,000. It'll be there next year, $75,000.
For here on forever, or is it like for like a 5-year purchase?
Does it decline?
I think it does decline, because a lot of times when you purchase a reading program, you're purchasing the books up front too.
Okay.
And you know, those books stay for a while, and you got different leveled readers, because you got kids in first grade that read at different levels. And the whole thing about reading now, which is so much better than when we went to school, is that there's so many more interesting books to read at different levels. So a lot of that's the first year price to purchase those books. And then you get the consumables that will be there for years to come. So Mary has spoken, and I think it's like, I don't know what it goes down to the next year and following, but I don't believe it should be 75,000.
Can we clarify what the long-term cost of the program will be then, I guess?
And just if I may, so I'm showing that as an annual cost in my notes. So we're
Because
gonna
that's
clarify
big
this
then,
point.
because every year we typically have been spending a good chunk of money to replace something. So now if this new thing is now an annual expense, in addition to what we're gonna be replacing in the future, that's more than just a little, that 54,000 is all of a sudden a lot more.
Correct.
And does it have like a part two to that question is, is it a 5-year term, right? Does that end?
Well, if it's forever and ever, amen, it's like
And
it's a
what,
long-term plan.
what Mary told us is she asked the company, well, can we pay for more years up front? And my notes are showing that, yep, you can have 3 years for 125,000. But that means you have to pay the 125 in this year.
Right.
Right? And then, yeah, it'll go to zero, but, to me, that's one
No,
of
but I
those
mean,
spiky
like-
scenarios. So I think Doug is right, that it is gonna be a little bit less, but there will be an ongoing annual cost, but it won't be 75.
So what will that be and when do we hit it?
Yep.
Because like I said, every year we typically invest in one of our things, and if now we're gonna start having an annual expense for the same program.
No, good question. So Heidi, are you grabbing?
I wrote it down.
She captured it, yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
I'm
And
trying.
Mary may answer it during the meeting, so
She may,
let us
okay.
know.
And I think in that same, I just lost my place, in that same item, building on that, I think just for clarification, grades 1 through 5 are, that purchase is for year 2, and then kindergarten would be starting year 1. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so I guess in addition to that, Heidi, is there gonna be an ongoing annual cost for kindergarten after this first year?
Got it.
Other questions for curriculum? Okay. Let's move to special services.
Okay, so with the special services budget, Sophia Fowler is our new director of student services, and she has provided this overview. So basically, there's an increase in the budget of $254,577. And that, the major drivers of that are, the district-wide professional services line is up by $181,148. $134,000 of that amount is for tuition alone. And so what we're seeing, and if you work your way through the budget, I put a little line next to every time I saw rate increase, rate increase, rate increase, rate increase. It's all throughout here. And you'll find that the providers of special services are all increasing their rates. Not a surprise, given what we're seeing across the board in the economy, but those rate increases are incorporated in here and resulting in those kinds of increases. There's also a transportation cost increase of $107,474. That's driven by two things. There's a rate increase relative to our contract for that. And also, I think there are more students in need of that transportation. So it's driven by students, where students are going, and the fact that the rates are going up. And then, this differs a little bit from that slide I just shared, but this says repositioning in district-wide site services produces a savings, but that other spreadsheet showed it as a,
I think because this is just
Her
of the
budget.
45.
yeah.
Yeah, and why it's not the 51. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why there's two different.
But those were the drivers that she had in there.
I'll start with a question. The transportation piece, is that a multi-year contract, or is that a year-to-year for special ed transportation?
So, special ed is tricky. If it's something that we can do with our contract with First Student, we do that. But there are also other individual runs, and if you're driving a student to an out-of-district placement, you end up contracting with a provider who's able to do that. Sometimes it's piggybacked on with other districts, so a student from another district's being picked up, driven by or near Litchfield, and we're able to piggyback onto that, we do it. But other times, we have to contract a bus, and it's not inexpensive.
I mean, it looks like a majority of it's with First Student. I just didn't know if there was some sort of agreement in place with them or not.
I think they had the right of first refusal.
I believe that is accurate, Carrie, and then, but in some cases, depending on staffing, I mean,
Right. They have to refuse.
they refuse. It's not even they refuse, they just can't. So-
Decline to be able to do it, yeah, but it's, yeah. So, we'd love to, but we can't.
Questions for special services?
So if we've seen the number, like, significant increases, are we seeing offsets in revenue from, like, catastrophic aid or those kind of things that are supposed to help offset special ed?
Not really. The rules relative to catastrophic aid really limit the amount that we're able to get, and so that is not an offset by any stretch.
No, it's
You-
okay, a whole unfunded mandates kind of thing, I got you.
Exactly, and you may offset a portion of a child's services, but,
No, the reality is,
We
like,
go
at this
after it,
point,
but-
like, every bit helps, cause it is expensive, so.
and the other piece is, remember that the board had taken, we had relaxed the amount of Medicaid that we were going after because, we were down so many staff. And it's like, do we want the limited staff that we have servicing kids, or do we want them filling out paperwork to try to access revenue? And the revenue rates have been cut. We went from having like 130, I'm making these numbers up, but $130,000 down to $20,000. And it was, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. By the time you put in all that paperwork and followed all those regulations to capture a fraction of what we used to get, and to put that on the backs of staff who are already being spread too thin, we just step back from that. Now we're reevaluating that. So we've met again with the company and we're trying to determine, is this the right path to stay? But it's become so complicated. It's not free money that is easy to pick. Let's put
No,
it that way.
I get it shouldn't be free, but at the same point, there was once upon a time a promise to help fund this stuff and talk about lawsuits for education. It seems like it'd be a great ground to cover.
Additional questions for special services?
Yeah, Dr. Jetty, if I could just rehash a conversation that you and I had during one of the school board presentations. Do I remember, did I hear you correctly that the district-wide professional services, we were pitched last year that, you were gonna find somebody that then would be available? Is it correct that we never found a person to be able to fill that position? Or did we fill that position and they just weren't? Because remember when the position came up last year, it was, look, we can cut tuition cost by taking this in-house and getting this particular person.
got you.
Like, can you just walk me through again how, like, did that investment pay off?
So we have, because I was at the high school, and
Yes.
we have brought a person in
Yep.
to that position. And so the other thing is, so yes, they are there, and they are meeting student needs at the high school. But has it resulted in fewer kids going out of district? I'll have to get back to you on, because I'm not sure of exactly where those numbers landed. When Devin pitched it last year with us, she felt that it was something that was going to be able to keep students in-house. I will tell you, and again, going back to the unfunded mandate concept, the state last year upped the age of special ed to 22. They added a whole year at the end. And so that is something that we are obligated to meet, and there is money available to us at the end of the year. But again, there were rules put on trying to access that money, and so we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're able to get at it.
Okay, so I guess, sorry.
It's
Ms.
on the
Ames,
list.
if basically what I'm looking for is, look, if we didn't fund the position that Ms. Bandersky had proposed and the voters approved, then what would that increase have been? Because I realize there's multiple variables there. There could be more students and more students that needed more diverse offerings, because we had talked about this last year, that, you can't just put one person in there and they magically can do everything for everybody.
Correct.
But at least that way, if we could get an idea in terms of that $95,000 to $99,000 investment, what did we save in terms of out of district tuition? That would be fantastic.
If I recall too, was that supposed to be transitional services? Is that what the goal was?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
So at the high school, it was, so I'm personally not linking it to savings of out-of-district placement. I'm linking it to savings of not paying Easter Seals to come in and provide transitional services by having somebody in-house providing the services. So, and I'm not sure that it was a savings as much as just a better way of doing the business. But that's my recollection of it. We'll get that clarified to make
Because
sure.
if that's the answer, there's still $30,000 for Easter Seals in here.
Well, you can't completely eliminate it.
Can't completely,
Yeah.
okay.
Easter Seals also provides a multitude of different services. So transitional is one of them, but they provide transportation also. So there are other things they do.
Okay.
Other questions for special services?
Is ESY, is that extended school year?
That's correct.
And is that the time period, the 18 to 22? Is that what?
No, that's actually during the summer.
During the
so,
summer, okay.
So we run the summer program.
Oh,
for
okay, so
students
this says
who-
Easter Seals ESY, so it's probably that
The summer
chunk
part.
that the teacher's not working then.
There you go.
Okay, that makes sense.
Additional special services questions? Okay. Last one we have on the list this evening is facilities. Shall I give a high-level overview and then move to any questions?
Yeah, we've got 5 slides, so this is a lot of high level, but we'll sum it up.
Medium level overview.
So buildings and grounds. As you know, our buildings and grounds, we kind of run the gamut, right? There are a lot of needs at Griffin in particular. It's our oldest facility, and there are just ongoing and continuing needs that develop there. The middle school is, of course, our middle child in terms of age, and with the renovation work that's going on there, we think it's going to be put into exactly the right position. It's going to be buttoned up in very good shape going forward. And then, of course, Campbell, which everybody thinks of as the baby, the youngest ship in the fleet, is 22 years old, and things are going wrong at Campbell also. So investing into a 22-year-old building is also something that we're starting to realize more and more of. So when you go through this budget, you will see that we've increased the amount of money available for annual inspections, and basically what we did is we compiled the list and we put it all into one spot. So in the past, the inspections were pulled from various parts in the budget, and we said, let's just have one place and list them all so that we know exactly what inspections we're required to complete and make it easy to know where to pay for them out of the budget. Supplies, we're asking for a 3% increase. That's inflationary. Everything has gone up, so the price of paper towels, toilet paper, cleaning supplies are all up. Water, we've seen a 10% increase, and so we're passing that along in the budget because the bills are just coming in higher. I think you probably are experiencing that in your home water usage or water bills also if you're on the water system. Rubbish also was increased, and so we had to increase that line because we're being asked to pay more for rubbish removal. GMS repairs and maintenance, we put a 10% increase into the budget because of the age of the building and the stuff that we're seeing happening at GMS. At LMS, we've added lines for HVAC monitoring, so now that we will have the air source heat pumps and all the updated HVAC systems, we're going to need to have those monitored, and so we've added that line in to cover that. The energy price one, here we were just trying to show those projections where we are, and so, you know, we've obviously done this update on the 45-cent. Oops, let me go back. What did I do? There we go. We've seen an increase on that, or a decrease in that 45-cent projection. You know, to Carrie's point, so our energy consultant is also the one who suggested to us these prices as to what we should be looking at for oil and for propane. You know, you're talking about crystal ball behavior at this point in time, but it certainly is not escalating out of the norm of what we're seeing out there. And so, again, we're going to continue to monitor that, but that's where we got those numbers from. And I want to just pause on that for a second because, you know, we are dialing back the 45-cent I'm not sure oil at 450 and propane at 315 is out of touch with the reality of what is on the horizon, but
Is there an opportunity for any 18, 24-month contracts with oil or propane that could reduce those costs?
I'm not sure, yeah. Yeah, because again, those are projected costs, and I think as of right now, people are paying more for that in oil and propane this year as of now.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure if they do more than a 12-month contract.
But you're excluded from some of the taxes though, are you not?
Correct.
So when I pay my oil bill, you shouldn't be paying less
Yeah.
than me anyway, because,
Yeah, 20 cents, I think.
Like, how do you typing that down to?
Got
All
it.
right, great.
Thank you, Heidi.
so in buildings and grounds, it's a $531,000 overall increase that we're looking at. So again, these numbers are gonna,
These are old numbers.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, those don't reflect what we just talked about.
they
the
don't,
17.
they
No.
don't. So GMS, there is an increase for oil and propane still that will be, included in the budget.
And for electric. Electric still has
that's
gone
right.
up, it's just not up to the same degree.
That's correct. So we are gonna pull out some of that increase, but it's still up. Energy costs are up. At Campbell, they're up, and at LMS, we're still proposing the decrease of 14,000, mainly because of the electric coming from the solar array. When that is up and running, that will be, providing the power for us, so we will not have to increase the amount there.
Could you pause right there real quick? So this shows a $531,000 overall increase where it stands, and I realize you haven't taken any action on the electric rate side, but based on the estimates that you provided at that 17-cent rate, if we're able to lock that in tomorrow, that would show for GMS and CHS a combined savings in the budget of about $130,000, which would take that overall increase for buildings and grounds from 530 to 400. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
How do we buy our oil and propane? Is it through like a co-op, or is it we go directly to like a local company and try and get it?
Oil and propane, I call around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The other piece that should be noted, and again, this is a result of the district taking action last year on the LMS project. So there is $168,037 increase in lease payment for Bank of America. So that's the amount of the lease payment. Remember, the district had generated the $195,000, and then the actual payment is $363,036. So we had to increase to close that gap out. And the savings that are associated with the renovation project that's being done are helping to pay that gap, right? The difference between that. So we've reduced $1,000 in HVAC repairs, because it'll all be new HVAC equipment. We've reduced $20,000 in HVAC service and maintenance because, everything will be under warranty and under, able to be serviced under warranty at that point in time at LMS. There is a $20,280 reduction to building services repairs, and also a $3,000 reduction to boiler repairs because there won't be a boiler any longer at the middle school. So those are some of the immediate savings that we can put toward that increase in lease payment to offset that, that amount. In addition, and of course, the savings in electric and oil at LMS, $161,412. And we are using, if we had not done that project and we had to project what it would cost, and remember the electric, we're gonna have to adjust that electric number down now also because that was using the 45 cent for a half a year. But the oil budget is being, so you have the electric budget projection, which will be less than the 148. The oil budget projection would have been 108. So if you take the 256, I'm sorry, the 108 and the 148, it adds up to 256. The annual cost of solar will be locked in at $95,120, which if you deduct away from the 256,532, that you got by adding the electric and the oil, you're at the 161,412. So those are what we feel are actual cost avoidance that came from that project. And we also, in fairness, that last item is we included the increased price to monitor the systems. So these systems are very sophisticated, and we have a control company that we're gonna contract with in order to do that monitoring, so that if there are issues or alerts, they'll be able to track that and stay on top of it for us.
Will maintenance also receive a warning or an alarm? I know that's the way it's set up right now. I know you'll have a monitoring system, but will maintenance have that also?
Yes, they do, but, so the challenge that we've had is, our facilities director and custodial supervisor have been acting as custodians this year. And so responding to alerts and alarms at the same time that they're making sure there's toilet paper in the bathroom has been a challenge. So right now, because of the staff shortage, having it outsourced and having somebody monitor that is the better way to go. We're stretched thin.
Questions for facilities?
I'm looking at, page 9, CHS grounds 330. The 16,100, is that literally just to fertilize the fields? Is that more than that?
I believe that is just to fertilize.
Would it be cheaper to go to Tim Sturfer and do it yourself? I don't know. Granted, I realize you're not gonna push around a little Scots thing like I do, but I don't know.
There are schools where, you know, they have a booster club that helps with some of that stuff. My mother-in-law used to strike fields too and do all that stuff.
That's a lot of money.
That is.
I think, just a couple of thoughts on that.
Granted, you have to have
So-
the people to do it, I understand.
Yeah, there is that problem.
I walk around with the broadcast spreader at home
Yeah.
too, but I'm on, half an acre, so it doesn't
Yeah.
take that long. These guys are on a riding device.
Yeah.
I see them fly by my window, and, it is quite an operation to get it out there. And I think the other thing is I'm using one bag.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're using truckfuls.
Yeah, so when you that's Campbell, so think about that. I would be curious too, I don't know how that compares to what the town is getting for,
For, like,
I'm sure Dara or
sawmill
Sawmill,
and
you must
stuff,
be
yeah.
fertilizing those fields too. So if you feel that that's out of sync and maybe there's a different provider, let us know that. But I can't imagine you're not fertilizing it. We don't fertilize at Griffin because it's basically a sod farm. So you just let it grow and stay out of its way.
That's true.
It has to be mowed twice a week. That's the problem down at Griffin, so.
Mr. Leary, would you have the details for that from the town side?
I'll look them up, see if I can find it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm sure it's broken out. I know I saw the contract for the total.
And
I
they're
think the
rat-
total was like 85,000, but that included mowing, I think,
90,000, yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I don't know if it broke out fertilization or
Yeah.
not.
And
But I'm
quite a
thinking
few
about my
fields.
yard, what I pay a service to do it, there's a lot more ground at CHS.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
it's, when you just start
Yeah.
multiplying, I'm not how many square feet there are, but
But if they're fertilizing, is it primarily the field though? Like, you're not fertilizing everywhere, I wouldn't assume.
They fertilize
Think so.
everything with grass. So, like, outside my window, I've got that patch of grass to the pine trees. But I'll tell you, before it was being done, it was dead. There was no grass. It was like a sand pit out there, and now it's actually pretty nice. It's green.
We could put a rock garden in and save us that.
Well, anybody who thinks putting rocks in around a high school is a smart idea needs to
I have
rethink
young
that,
boys, so
because
you can get we live in the Granite State, you can get rocks almost anywhere, so.
this is true, but you don't provide the ammo
Are you
outside the
saying our
window.
kids are-
No, not our kids. It's kids from out of town, Carrie, that come
Okay.
in. It's the opposing football team I'm worried about.
Other questions for facilities?
What did you say you had for propane? You were estimating, was it 315?
It was 450 and
450 for
315.
oil and 315 for.
315.
Oh, for the price?
propane. Yeah.
Because I think the town has 225 down
For oil?
for propane.
Propane.
For this year or for projections?
It's for 2023 cost estimate, that's what they put in.
Should buy from them.
if you look, you know, those are our actual prices. 133 went up to 185, went up to 225, and we were advised to budget at 315.
I'm wondering if
So-
it's because of that extra 6 months on the end of the,
I mean, I think I would
so is
just,
that for half,
I think the
like
town was
half the
low.
year?
Well, we can look at
I thought they were
they
low.
used it based off of the energy projections from the federal government. We can look it up there too and just compare.
I remember looking that up when the town presented it, and it was right at what was on that website.
Yep.
I would, I think, double down on Miss Douglas's comments on this, that seeing how high the electricity rate was projected by the consultant, and Mr. Totten doing a little legwork on that resulted in potential $130,000 savings in the budget. I think it's worth doing that for oil and propane. And if there's opportunities to reach out directly to companies to lock something in that, yes, might be a little bit higher than 2022, 2023, but can result in the savings in this budget, it's worth the conversation, I think.
What are we paying right now for oil and gas?
So
Is it those numbers right there?
Those numbers, yeah.
379 and 225?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, your question on field maintenance, everything's lumped together under $87,500. That's fence, drainage, turf damage, repair irrigation system, bark mulch, et cetera, mowing, fertilizing, seeding, irrigation startup, and blowout.
That's for which fields?
That's for everything,
All of them.
All the fields.
for everything. Yep.
You might want to call those people.
It's a pretty good deal.
does it say who the vendor is?
Back to the same vendor as
yeah.
the year previous, I can't remember.
Natticook,
Natticook?
yeah, local kid. Ryan Lane's the gentleman that owns it.
Thank you.
They did a nice job.
Other questions for facilities? Okay.
JD, did you want me to include under the building and grounds question, I have there, is there an opportunity to contract for 18 to 24 months for propane and oil in order to reduce or mitigate? Did you want me to add anything more with that'll answer your most recent comment? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I just want to recap the questions that Ms. Ames captured that we have as follow-up for the school district. Make sure we've got everything. We have 3 questions that were not answered tonight that is going to be taken back. Curriculum, annual cost of reading program for grades 1 through 5. What's the term, ongoing cost? Same thing for the kindergarten program. Is there an ongoing cost after the first year? Second question was special services. Did the position at the high school from last year designed to provide transitional services in-house work/pay off? Did it reduce out-of-district services? And then kind of a sub-question under that, if we didn't fund the position that was proposed last year, what would the increase have been and what would we have saved? And then the last question was the one around buildings and grounds, or an opportunity to contract for a period of term for propane and oil in order to reduce or mitigate pricing. Okay. Any final questions? This is our last opportunity to ask questions
This email's like we sent.
of the school before voting begins in 2 weeks. I say it's not our last opportunity to ask questions. We can obviously ask questions via email after tonight, but our last opportunity in person to ask questions.
I can do that one.
You can ask questions before you make a motion to cut too. We'll be happy to answer.
Absolutely.
I was like, you trying to cut this short for Mr. Taylor or not?
Not at all. All right. Thank you all for joining us again. Appreciate the.
Just one procedural piece, and this will be a surprise to Ms. Ames too, but we're thinking that next Wednesday, or Wednesday the 30th, we're going to possibly have a special meeting of the board just to take final budget action if necessary. So we're just reserving that as a potential, because the next meeting of the board is not until the 7th, which is after you have begun the work. And we're just looking at a few things, thinking it may make sense that we
You
just
should
have
take credit for your rates before we take it, cause I'm happy to take credit for $130,000 worth of savings.
one. If you watched last night, I beat you to the punch on that one. I said the board's getting credit for this, so they actually made a motion to authorize us to come up
Alright.
with a number so they get credit. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I saw that.
we're in
And
that game. It's good.
So my ask would be, I know Doug had said he was gonna send us an updated PDF early next week. If you do meet on the 30th and take any action, then we would just wanna have that in our hands that evening going into the 1st.
I think what we would propose is a spreadsheet similar to what you saw. Just any action that was taken there, and we can literally open the book, deduct it right out so that we know where we sit with it.
I think that makes sense.
And
Yeah.
we may not need to do that, but we just wanna make sure that everybody's aware that right now we think that might be.
Well, you haven't taken action on the I mean, the electric rate's gonna be something you're gonna have to do, right? I would assume so.
The board authorized us to bring you the number so they
Okay.
get credit. But we can,
So
we
that's
can
the,
actually probably have that meeting and they get credit.
if
because they-
hypothetically that's the only change you're making, then you wouldn't necessarily have to have a special meeting.
Correct, but
Correct.
we think there could be some other changes. We're doing everything we can because we're still looking at a budget that's up higher than any of us are comfortable with. And we just want to make sure the board has all the facts and all the numbers.
Okay.
So we're trying to bring to you the leanest budget possible when, you've heard over and over, a lot of it's uncontrolled costs, but we're doing everything we can.
And we appreciate that. And I would say any change, if you are able to lock that rate in tomorrow or whenever, and we know what those cost savings are gonna be, I think just as soon as if you wanna send that to us in that spreadsheet that you sent tonight and update it, and hey, we've made those changes, and here's the changes in those line items for electric at GMS and CHS, and the spreadsheet's updated so that we have that.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you know what the number is right now? Like,
The bottom line number,
bottom line number, yeah.
the increase amount,
What are we at?
So it's on that spreadsheet I shared too.
Yeah.
So,
As of right now, I requested access to it.
I don't have access.
oh,
Yeah, it's probably
Oh,
something with your.
that was because I forwarded it.
okay, gotcha.
Here, I think I can do it from here, Doug. I think I can, I didn't do it within the spreadsheet, I just forwarded your email.
what's the percent increase that you're showing?
So before the reduction in electricity, the percent increase would be 5.08 compared to last year's budget. So, which is a dollar amount of 1,186,917, with the 130,000 that we're pretty sure we'll be able to reduce. Then we're at an increase of 4.52%, or 1,056,917.
Just
You put those
Follow-up question?
today.
Oh, sorry.
No,
You
I'm
put
not-
those placeholders in that spreadsheet already, right? Made
did.
some assumptions
Yep.
for that, okay.
Mr.
Mr.
Todd,
Taylor.
do you have a breakdown as far as how much of that increase is contractual? That can't avoid because it's already.
Yeah,
I mean, Dr. Jenny, you said, I think it's 78% of your overall budget is personnel.
yeah, so we started, when I started presenting to the school board, I don't know if you wanna go back to
Is it in
the,
the slides?
it's in the slides.
Yeah, it was on the beginning slides.
Beginning of the
Beginning
slides.
slides, let's go
Yeah.
up there, all right, so you're
And
looking
these were
for,
just some of the bigger increases that I put in there, as far as kind of showing that it's a different year to budget. I know it's my first year budgeting, but it's also a different year if you talk around the state, because there's just so many increases that are beyond people's control with just higher costs. So keep on going. So there are some of the increases that we've seen. Again, that 196 will go down, because that includes the electric. The 164 will go down. The 351 is an increase in the LEA, which was approved last year. And again, I'm saying that's a good thing, because they're also seeing increases to the food that they buy at home, and their electricity, and we want to retain our staff. Increase of the LSSA, again, a good thing. And then the insurance, that was a 10% placeholder. But it actually keeps going, I think, from the to the next slide. So that was an increase in out-of-district tuition. Again, that's matching the kids that we have now and where they're going this year and then next year as projected. Increase in transportation, and then increase in the lease for the middle school.
So is it, just to make sure I'm reading this correctly, if you, can you go back to the second slide there? All of those, items that you just listed are either contractual, or not all contractual?
Bottom three.
Yeah.
So I guess, Ms. Ames, if you could put down a question, ideally what I would like to know is the percent and dollar amount of year-over-year increase. How much of that is based on contractually obligated, either contracts with staff or the contracted LMS project?
Be basically pulling out the.
So what do we want to do with energy costs? So, we would be able to, we'll be locking in a rate for electricity, so that will be contracted in a way. But the second half of that is how much you use of electricity as well.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking in terms of, what the school board and Dr. Jetty put pen to paper in terms of LEA, LSSA,
What about transportation?
North Branch, transportation,
Because that's contracted.
yeah.
Okay,
Then at that point, we can't touch it.
yeah,
We're stuck with it.
great, I'm gonna
And
put
there's
those
no
in.
way to get around it.
And I would be curious how much is from energy lines. Also, because even though it's not a contract yet, it's not something that we really have control over either.
Your 243,000 for health insurance, that
That's gonna be
Low.
higher.
went up,
Yeah.
right? Because it's 14% now, right?
We're still working on
We're still
the health
working on that.
insurance numbers, so,
Yeah.
so I think a couple of things about this slide. The electric increases in lines 1 and 2, we're gonna make an adjustment on, so we probably should just update these slides.
I was
It
just
would
writing
make sense.
update.
It'll answer the
summary
question by updating the
slides.
slide. So, lines 3 and 4 are set. Those were collective bargaining that was standardized last year, and, that's the increase that we're looking at. The 5th line, we're still working on that, and so let us come back to you with the right number in that spot. But again, that would be
Contractual.
contracted also, because it's all tied back into the 2 CBAs. Going to this slide, the out-of-district tuition, we know, again, the increase of 134 is to match actual tuitions next year. So that's an increase that is driven by the increased prices. Transportation, same thing, it's contractual. And then the increase in the budget for the municipal lease is now part of the contract. I mean, that's the obligation that we have to get that project paid for. So,
Is the only thing that's not contractual that you've mentioned there are the utility costs.
Yeah,
But you still, it's like a.
yeah, I'll use contractual loosely
Yeah.
because we're contracted to pay for the utilities. I mean,
Right.
that the bill comes in.
I think,
I guess the point of my question is more, look, you know what, if you go back a slide, you have, approved by the voters. Like, okay, you know what? Town members, you signed off on this. Like, this is the result of you checking that box. And you know what? There's nothing that can be done about it. It has to go up by X amount because you put pen to paper, just like the LMS project.
I did want to, the health and just, it looks like you've already made that adjustment in the spreadsheet you sent us. Am I reading that correctly? There's a $43,000 change.
There is, we still are looking at that, though.
Okay,
Let us tweak that
got it.
to get it where it needs to be.
Okay.
It's interesting too, because we look at the healthcare costs are just staggering when you look at what they're doing year to year. And we did a new health insurance plan for our employees 2 contracts ago. I think we're in the 2nd contract of the yellow plan compared to the green and red plans. I can't even imagine what those plans would have cost, because we made the switch to produce savings, and they did produce savings, but they've continued to increase also. So it's like, had we not made that leap, I just cannot even imagine what the healthcare increase we'd be looking at here.
And I don't think taxpayers are gonna be like, oh, well, gee, I saved a whole bunch of money by not, they're gonna see 1.6 some million, and
But Carrie, the point is, they made that decision.
I don't think anybody voted for a 14% increase in health insurance.
They should know that those things happen. And you know what?
Well,
I think we need to be able, come contract time, there has to be a discussion on that stuff, because
Well, that's
town and school,
so that's a
healthcare
different
is
story.
killing us.
Could you negotiate something that says, you know what, anything that goes over 10% in a yearly basis, the employee has to pick up the additional 4%? I mean, sure, that's something that could potentially be negotiated.
I sat in on the negotiations. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, you can suggest it.
But then
I'm happy to propose it.
Here's my point.
the alternative, you start laying people off.
Right, so here, and that's the point that I keep trying to make, is that, you know what, the cliff is coming at some point. You know, like, Mr. Totten, you mentioned, you know, like, hey, good thing they got increases because, you know what, food costs more and things of that nature. But then, you know what, also try to talk to the person at the 55 and over community that's living off of Social Security, and they're not getting, you know, they get an increase, but then they also end up getting the health increase as well, and they just keep falling further and
Social
further
Security's getting a
behind.
bigger increase than this increase,
Well, yeah, but then,
almost 9%.
yeah, and then all of a sudden their medication is, you know,
I'm just-
50% higher, so you know what, that eats it away. Point being is that we are going to hit a point in the not too distant future that, you know what, the taxpayers and whether it's the town or the school are gonna hit a tipping point that somebody is gonna have to yell mercy. Because it can't just keep going and going and going based on, you know what, look, this is what we need in order to have teachers. To Ms. Douglas's point, maybe then and that's part of the reason why I brought up the CTE program. Like, how do we figure out how to scale appropriately to educate the students, but not force people out of town or force them to not pay for certain things because it's the tax bill and you know what, that one I have to pay.
There's also the state piece of this.
Yeah.
Seeing where that not legislation, litigation, what do we call it?
Do you think we're gonna benefit from that? We're a wealthy town. That's not gonna
No,
help
I'm
us.
Saying it's town and taxpayers, but the state is not totally off the hook here either.
Just a clarification on the question that's in the notes there, Miss Ames. I think
Yes.
one thing that I heard Mr. Taylor say is what were items that were approved by voters? So I think you captured everything that he asked, and just in addition to that, what were items that were approved by voters?
Okay.
Thank you.
In the board ought to reduce the salary line, right?
Was that attrition?
They
That
did an
fail.
attrition reduction
Yeah.
of 150,000.
150, so it went up 350, they removed 150, so it's up 200, but in net, right?
And the other thing, you know, if you watched last night's board meeting, the Friends of Music and Performing Arts were at the meeting because we've taken a cut in our music staffing. And it was a very difficult thing. There's not a person in the room who was saying that this, I'm trying to phrase this correctly, you know, we all have a passion for for the arts, right? And so we understand that, but on the flip side, our enrollment is declining. We have a middle school with 355 students and 2 music staff, and we need to do something because we can't not just keep asking for more. We've got to find a way to deliver some cuts in this, and so that was a cut that was made.
I do applaud the board. I don't applaud, well, I think I gotta say this.
It's paper.
I applaud the board for right after that very difficult decision of not increasing the athletic side, because I think that would have sent a very bad message that we heard from the community that evening. So I think as maybe that wasn't as difficult of a decision, but that was the right decision.
But they are,
Optics, you got the
Right.
optics, absolutely.
but they are painful decisions.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
you have people in town with passions in one direction or another, and they're not necessarily competing passions. You know, they shouldn't be seen as competing. It's like everybody's advocating for their own student and their own area, and it's hard stuff. And even making the recommendations, you know, I got a couple of cold shoulders today when I was out in the schools. People don't like that we're making hard decisions. That's the reality of it, and it's unfortunate. But we're doing everything we can, and looking at, you know, what is it that we can bear and what is the right level.
So, I have a question, like Doug just said, I mean, this coming year is an unusual year with the increases in, fuels and everything else. And I know we compare a lot to, a cohort group. So I don't know if you'd reached out to them and inquired, like, where their budgets are gonna fall for 2024.
I've talked to a couple of them, but not a lot. I mean, this is also SB2, so this budget is done a little bit before some of the other schools that don't
I'm just
run
curious,
through
because I
that.
know we have a
Yeah.
cohort group of like 10 schools we compare things to. I don't know if we got any
Their budget's
information
up
from.
4 or 5%. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just curious, I mean, because of fuel costs and contracts and, less state aid and higher insurance rates, are we like where they are? Or
You know, I
where
wish
we
there was
are?
almost like a state webpage where you could just put it into, like, what is your expected budget percentage up at this point type of thing, because, yeah.
Anything else? Any final questions for Dr. Jetty or Mr. Taunton this evening?
I
Actually, I
threw
do.
that question in there, Brian, just to say overall, how does our budget compare to peer cohorts? I don't know if you'll even have time to look into that or not, but I
Yeah.
Thank you.
figured it was a worthy question to follow up on.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
Just have one more question. So when I take a look at the sports, is it safe to assume, and this can just be a question for in the future, things like bass fishing, gymnastics, and then if swimming comes back, are they all self-transport? Because I'm not seeing them in the list as far as CHS athletic transport.
Say the three again, it's bass fishing.
Yeah, bass fishing, gymnastics, and then if for some reason somebody signs up for swimming
Yeah.
2021, 2022 was a 0, but
So we're not transporting for those.
Those
Those
are
tend to
self-
be individual students or families. So, swimming, it could be somebody who's on a swim team already, and then they're practicing with another school, and they're obligated to get themselves there. And it's the same, it's interesting too, if you look at the chart, like bass fishing, he's very clear to say no boat.
There's only one.
I don't think he's budgeting for boats, so I haven't
Right.
seen that yet, but anyway.
so pretty much the cost of those like one-off programs with low enrollment is maybe a coach, or I guess there has to be some adult.
There has to be
that's
somebody who
paid, right?
serves as the coach, but
Stipend.
it isn't necessarily even, again, if they're practicing with, I think gymnastics goes with Londonderry, so that's covered. I don't know if we pay a fee. There could be an NHIA enrollment fee, very minimal fee that we pay
Okay.
for that.
All right,
again,
sorry,
it's pretty minimal.
I know I said one question, it's turned into two. I don't see hockey on here. And I know we've got the whole
So hockey's completely
pack is
self-funded.
different, but how much do we, self-funded?
It is self-funded.
Okay.
Yep, so that is, we participate with Pembroke Academy, and that is self-funded.
Mr. Taylor, are your questions answered, or should I put them as follow-up questions? I feel
No.
like they were answered.
Nope, they're all
Okay.
answered, thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I want to stay with school business. Any general updates, Miss Ames, that we haven't discussed from your meeting last night that you wanted to share?
I think you saw, we've discussed them as part of this. Ms. Hirschberger sent around an email that outlined the different conversations and provided documents. Obviously, it was a difficult night last night, as we said, but we have to make tough choices, and I know the town's doing the same thing, so it's hard across the board.
Thank you. Any questions for Miss Ames or for the school? Okay. Town business, Mr. Leary, any updates from the town side?
Well, they did set the tax rate. It's gone up a little bit, as to be expected, 1902, 1903.
1903.
1903, yeah. And also, our fire chief has resigned. He's going to be taking a position in New Boston. I guess it's quite it's a good jump for him. And we're gonna miss him. He's been here 10 years. But it's a good move for him professionally. He seems really excited for it, so wish him the best.
Thank you. And just to reiterate something that I said earlier, I'm trying to find that email so that I have the correct information. His retirement going away party is Wednesday, November 30th, 4 to 7 p.m. At the fire station. And the general public is welcome. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Leary?
So one question I have is, in the past, we've been concerned about tax bills going out after the first because cash flow. We're gonna be faced with an situation where we have to issue temporary notes, or do we have cash flow sufficient to buy us for the extra 2 weeks?
I got mine today.
No, I know, but the billing now is traditionally due 12/1.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so now they're gonna be, miss 2 weeks worth of cash flow. So do we have the buffer
Yes.
to make it without hitting temporary notes?
Yes, that's what the unexpended fund is for. The balance is basically to float the town or the school should there be a shortage of revenue. Tax bills don't come in, people don't pay them, state funding, et cetera, we keep, that buffer is there for that to keep the town running.
Anything else for Mr. Leary?
I just have a question. I know we talked about a new vehicle and that was taken out of the budget. I'm just curious, cause like, is it because there aren't that many officers doing detail work right now? Like the last week or two, there's been like 6, 7, today there were 8 cruisers sitting in the parking lot at like 1:30 in the afternoon. So I'm just wondering, if they normally just go out for detail? And that's why, the last couple of weeks, it's just been like a parking lot of them.
There's usually at least 2 out there in the day, because there's always 2.
Right.
Sometimes 3 on whatever, they might have been here for lunch or for a meeting. Then there's usually a detail vehicle that's gone out as well. And the other 3 are probably the admin vehicles, the chief, the captain,
Yeah,
and
I've seen those too,
detective,
but
yeah.
I mean, regular cruisers I've been seeing a lot lately too. So I guess my point is, like, if it's just, those are just normally used for detail, I mean, maybe.
The oldest ones in the fleet are used for details.
Right,
Yeah.
but I'm just wondering, rather than buying a new vehicle, which we took out of the budget, I mean, are you better off like just buying like a different type of vehicle, not a cruiser, to use for detail?
I think it has to be a cruiser, because it's gotta have the lights and the insignia on it, so that people realize that it is in fact a cop, but I can ask Mr.
Yeah,
Finch about
it's just,
that.
and again, I don't know if maybe they're doing less detail work right now, but I've just noticed over the last couple of weeks, there's been a
Yeah.
lot of cruises, like,
Been a lot there.
yeah.
I know they've all been up at the garage there at the north
Yeah.
end for
I do see
The
them.
fake speed trap.
works.
It does work. All right, I'm gonna circle back to review and acceptance of minutes. I skipped over that earlier. Has everyone had an opportunity to review our minutes from November 10th?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
I had a
motion.
small amendment,
Do what?
Okay,
a small amendment to them.
go ahead.
Is there a second?
Do I?
Second. I have a motion for Mr. Bork. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Barca. Discussion.
So then, do I amend your motion?
No, you just.
You can
I
just,
can just
say
put the
what the
mention, and
change is,
then
yeah.
you'd say, okay,
Yeah.
all right. On page 9, it just says, Ms. Stevens expressed her concern with the salaries for substitute teachers. My concern was with the para salaries. So I just wanted
Page
to
9.
have that changed. It's,
Yep,
up
I see it.
two-thirds down.
Yep.
I just wanted to have that
What did
changed
you
from
want that changed
substitute
to?
to paras.
Instead of substitute teachers, it should say Paris.
And my apologies for not getting that out earlier.
It's okay. I just made the
Life
change.
happens.
Okay. I had a motion and a second. That change has been made. Changes, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Abstain?
Aye.
And motion carries
Everybody-
801. Thank you.
Planning board does it differently, that's why I get confused with the motion sometimes.
All right, member input, new business. Any member input, new business this evening?
So the capital improvement plan meetings are still ongoing.
Yep.
They met last week to start the prioritization of the projects, so we went through first round. There is, the next meeting, will be November 29th to put together a PowerPoint so the committee can go over. On December 6th, there will be the public hearing, which will occur during the planning board meeting. And on December 12th, we'll present to the Board of Selectmen with the hope and expectation that it'll be done in time for warrant article presentations, because some of the items are identified as possible warrant articles, while also determining recommendations for ARPA fund usage. Some indicated some impact fees. You saw the pickleball being suggested up at which one is it? This is Sawmill, right?
Yep.
Sawmill. So that's ongoing. Hopefully we'll get it wrapped up soon. And along with that is the consideration for, the school presented there, to get into the plan, because that helps us set the updated impact fees, which I've been trying to push through, because we keep hearing about all kinds of developments. It would be nice to have them pay the updated fee for it, so hopefully that gets rounded out soon.
Thank you. And just circling back to something you said there, so the December 12th Board of Selectmen meeting, warrant article voting for the budget committee is January 5th.
Right, so I believe I couldn't find the updated one. The schedule, the presentation of warrant articles is the 15th or something around
Correct.
there, right?
Yes.
So I believe the hope is that the Board of Selectmen are super fast and efficient and can slide in any that they may want to add for the presentation to us.
Okay.
And that way, yes, we could still, but as we've seen in the past, things can get added at the last minute anyway, but should still be done in time for voting in January.
Correct. Thank you. And just real quick, school facilities, we last met Wednesday before, and that was when we did the tour of LMS. That was prior to our last meeting. And I think Ms. Hirschberger gave that update at our last meeting that we had done a tour of LMS. And that was filmed, Oscar filmed that, and that was posted on the town's YouTube channel. Any other member input, new business this evening? Okay, public input. I'll open it for public input. I'll close it for public input, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
A motion by Ms. Douglas,
Second.
second by Ms. Stevens. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion carries 9-0-0. And we will
Adjourn. I'd just like to say happy Thanksgiving to the board and to the town, and hopefully everyone has a safe and happy holiday.
Yes,
Thank
back
you,
at
sir.
you.
Absolutely. Everyone enjoy the holidays next week. Budget committee is not together. We get a week off.
that I
And
don't love
back
seeing you.
at it on December 1st for school voting.
I love
Have a great evening, everybody. Great
What are you
holidays.
talking about?